We are privileged today to honour Barry Williams. Barry Williams was the founder of the Lone Fathers Association, started in 1973. He also founded Parents Without Partners. He has done more for the men of Australia, and especially the single fathers, but also women and children and families, than any other man I know. He saved more men from suicide in this nation of Australia than any other man I know, and I mean that with all my heart. Here is Tony Miller, a good friend of Barry Williams, and of course myself worked closely together with Barry in the Parliament. Over to you, Tony.
Barry Williams, absolute legend. A BOM, a BEM, OAM, and MATE, and the last one's more important than all of them. Good friend, good mate. I've known him for years. We've been on more committees, inquiries, task force, child support engagement groups. I've been to many, many meetings with Barry over the years and spent a lot of time with him. He's an absolute hero. Many men are alive today because of Barry. He's helped so many people. His boots will never be filled. Absolute legend.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'd like to introduce to you today another good friend of both myself and Barry Williams, Wayne Butler. Wayne Butler co-founded the Shared Parenting Council of Australia. He's a barrister at law, and here is his tribute to this incredible man.
Barry Williams and I met in early 2000, around 2001, introduced with Ken Ticehurst MP, and started a long program of law reform. In 2006, Barry was instrumental in working with the Lone Fathers Association, Parents Without Partners, and the Shared Parenting Council in implementing some of the greatest reforms that have happened in Australia in respect to family law reform. Barry was an amazing gentleman. There are some amongst the human race who do very little, criticise, and in fact do nothing, and sit in their armchairs and complain. Barry Williams was absolutely not one of those. Barry Williams was one of the few who actually got things done. He was a dynamite hero for many families who were disadvantaged. He gave everything from his own personal wealth to his time, and gave up his family's time to deal with separated parents, in particular dads who were unable to have contact with their children.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Barry Williams had a very difficult childhood, and yet he triumphed all the same. And this is the amazing reality of this incredible man who, despite huge challenges growing up, he couldn't see his father. He was prevented by his mother from seeing his father. At 14, he ran away from home with his trusty dog and his .22 rifle, literally, and hitchhiked from Queensland down to Sydney. Listen now as Barry shares his story.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming, and thank you, Warwick and Alison and all your team for doing this wonderful thing. It's about time it was brought out in the open, even though we are supposed to have children's rights, and as the last speaker said before Barry, that the rights of the child are there, but it's never accepted by the politicians that are supposed to push it, and by the family court and other court. Well, Warwick wanted me to speak a little bit about my experience. I was in a broken family too. Many, many years ago, I was not allowed to see my dad once my mother got with her new partner, and we were, as a child, about 6-year-old, I was taken from Ballina, New South Wales, to the bush in Queensland, where I grew up. I had a very cruel stepfather who, well, I don't want to go into a lot of things, that he interfered with his own daughter at the time, so that's the sort of person he was. And I I can remember my dad coming from Sydney all the time. He was in a old Model T Ford at one stage, coming up to try and see us. And I remember we were always whipped away so he couldn't see us. And so I grew up not seeing my dad till I was 14 years old. And my story is true, and it's what happened. I decided at 14 years old that I was getting out of here from a place called Ravinia Creek in Queensland, and I was going to look for my dad. So I started walking, and naturally I walked the wrong way. I've always been a bit of a fool, but I ended up a 200 kilometre at least ahead of me. But I did it. I had a cattle dog and a 22 rifle. And Mum and in them days in Queensland, the police got around on horses, so I could see them coming through the bush. I lived in the bush, so I knew the bush pretty well. I could see them coming. So I'd grab the dog and hold it next to me and my rifle in a sugar bag. And I think it was on about the 15th day that I heard a noise, and I walked out, and there was a tractor going, a bulldozer, and they were snigging logs up onto a truck. And they couldn't believe it when I walked out, and they said, "Where'd you come from?" And I told them they couldn't believe it. And they were actually boiling a billy, and in them days it used to be in a billy of black tea, and it tasted good, I can tell you. But anyway, they gave me a ride into a place called Dalby in Queensland, and then another truck gave me a ride to Gundawindi, and another truck gave me a ride right through to Sydney. And I'm in Sydney, which was, I didn't even know it, but all I knew that my father lived in Little Crown Street. So he dropped me off in Big Crown Street, and somehow I found Little Crown Street, and I knocked on about 7 doors before this man came out and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm your son." And I found my dad, you know. So I didn't have a lot of time then with him because he actually died at a young age. And I feel that I'm for this right through because I feel it's a time the courts listened to the rights of the child. Now, what's happened is they in the previous government introduced what they call ICLs, Independent Children's Lawyers. Well, let me tell you, very few of them ever speak to the children. They make the decisions, and they brought in what they call court-writing reporters. These reporters are very biased in the way they write their reports in many cases, and the judges just take notice of what the court reporters have written, so that there's nothing in there where the child has said what it wants, you know. So I think, Warwick, I just wanted to thank you very much for letting me do that. And the lady there, I can't think of your name, Carla, and all the other speakers, and I'm right behind you, Warwick, as always. And my organisation has been going 43 years this year, or 42, whichever one it is, and we're made up of men and women too. We have a very large ship of women members who are hold senior positions, and we're about the children first. And our new stuff that we have to do as a service now is have people coming in and talking to us, and we're inviting mums and dads that can't speak to come in and spend 1 hour with us free with a lawyer, and we'll help them draw up their plans, and everything cost them nothing, and walk out of there, and the only cost it'll cost them is to lodge it to the court. Now, there's going to be a lot of lawyers and a lot of family court judges upset, but that's the way we're going, and we're going to do it. Thank you very much.
What an incredible man, what an amazing story. A story of sacrifice, a story of commitment, a story of great love for the families and the children of Australia. Several of us in the men's movement got together and decided it was now time to give Barry a lifetime award. So in November 2023, outside Parliament House at the 2,500 Empty Shoes exhibit, we were campaigning for zero male suicide, which was an issue that was very close to Barry's heart. We invited Barry to come to that celebration on the lawns of Parliament House to receive this very, very important award. Who's ever heard of the Lone Fathers Association? Put your hand up in the air if you've ever heard of the Lone Fathers. Lone Fathers started on the lawns of old Parliament House way back in the day, and it was 1973, and this man here held a hunger strike for who? the greatest minority group in this nation. I think it's 49.7%, if I remember rightly, the stats. The biggest minority group in the nation who are unheard and sadly often underappreciated. And we've got 2,500 shoes of men who didn't feel they were appreciated and took their own lives today. Barry has pulled more men out of suicide than any other man that I know in Australia today. He's been doing this for 52 years. He's been doing it. You know, this man across here on my left, Tony Miller's been doing it for 25 years. I'm a young spring chicken doing it for 20 plus years. But I want you to give a big hand for Barry Williams, everybody.